don't know why I can't remember it. All right. Hello, everybody. Today is Thursday, September 26th. This is MS Office Hours. My name is Heather Cox.
Hey, everyone. I'm Stephanie Stevens.
Hey, I'm Amy Bandy Taylor.
Hey, everybody. Anthony Wallace.
And we are very excited. I do not know a lot about the Inclusive Tech Lab, so I'm so pumped to hear from Bryce. And he's going to tell us all about it. It looks like he's got an amazing setup there. So, Bryce, the floor is absolutely all yours.
Wonderful. Thank you. Can someone pin me? I don't have any slides. It's just this. Oh, here we go. Great. Thank you so much. You talked about the Trojan horse. I am inside the Trojan horse. My name is Bryce Johnson. I've been a designer here at Microsoft for 15 years. And for the past 10, I focused exclusively on designing disability solutions. If folks are familiar with this thing, if you're not, that's totally fine. This is the Xbox Adaptive Controller. Behind me is the Super Bowl ad we had for this in 2019. This is an Xbox controller that we created for people with limited mobility who couldn't use a typical controller. And this was the start of not only this lab, but basically our practice in Windows and devices and how we approach inclusive design here in Windows and devices. And for a really quick demo, the challenge with traditional controllers with limited mobility is that these things are designed in a certain way. They make assumptions about how they're used. And if someone can't use them as they were designed, we had to recognize that we created the barrier, right? So the Xbox Adaptive Controller is modular. You can take a button, like say this button, and you can put it in here and move it around to where you want it, put the button where you have movement. So the reason why we call this the adaptive controller is that it's adaptable to you and not you to it. And that's a sort of a core foundation of our practice. So if you are familiar with the Super Bowl ad, I actually have one thing to show you in the sense that we actually didn't start with kids. That's funny. It's a fun thing about Xbox. Xbox doesn't really think about children a lot because we're all gamers. And so, we think about gamers. We actually started with vets. If you know anyone who's in service, they grew up playing video games. Their social life when they're deployed is largely video games. If they get injured while they're in service and they come home, it's even harder to integrate back into society. We recognized how difficult this was on their mental health, and that was the motivation for where we started in creating the adaptive controller. I am always happy to answer questions, and you can get my info from Heather. But just before we get started, I want you to know that if you've got your OTs, your SLPs, your TVIs, your paras, your ATPs, if they have questions, you'll want to send them to me. I am the person for that. So I'm going to show you the next thing that we worked on. And I'm going to go around the room and I'm going to basically show, oh, actually, you know what I'll do? I'll give you a quick sort of overview of the room. We've been open for about 6 years. We've hosted about 20,000 people in events just like this. We are a facility on the Microsoft campus dedicated to the disability community. So the most important thing about this space is that it is accessible to the disability community. And this is where we practice inclusive design. This is where the disability community comes in and helps us design our products. Because we believe in this ideal of the disability community called nothing about us without us. And we work as hard as we can to try to do that in practice. We could always do better though. So the next thing I want to show you is our adaptive accessories. And our adaptive accessories consist of, actually I'll show you this. They consist of a mouse, a hub, and some buttons. And these are meant for, again, for people with limited mobility who can't use regular peripherals. So let me start with the mouse. You may have students that you work with that have muscular dystrophy. Now, the trick with muscular dystrophy is that if you're a 6-year-old with muscular dystrophy, you probably are like a lot of other kids. By the time you hit 11, you're probably getting fitted for a wheelchair. By the time you're 30, you might have trouble holding up the weight of your own hands. So it's a degenerative muscle condition that basically makes you weaker as you get older. So the thing about the adaptive mouse at its core is that it is meant to be small and lightweight. It is 45 grams and it is, you can up the sensitivity of it to 6,000 DPI. Now, what does that mean? It means it's about 6 times more sensitive than a regular mouse. So someone who can only move this thing a few millimeters because of their strength, this mouse that's about half the weight of a regular mouse and 6 times as sensitive, can have a fully featured mouse just on its own. But the thing about this that makes it adaptive and how we think about adaptability is that we're always trying to think of this idea that we don't believe in one size fits all. You know, I think universal design gets a bad rap when it comes to assuming that the principles of universal design are one size fits all. It's certainly not the principles of universal design for learning. So we don't believe in one size fits all. We think about fit a lot. We think about one size fits one. Those are kind of ideas that we always think about. So the fun thing about our mouse is that you can basically press this little button on the back and pop off the tail, because in real life mice have tails and so do ours. And I'm going to take this 3D printed augmentation that we made and I'm going to snap it on, and it changes the form of the mouse. So this is probably a little bit more like what you're used to, but let me explain this one. This one was actually designed for a little girl with cerebral palsy. So she has involuntary movement, she has more strength and not a lot of fine motor control. She would accidentally hit buttons because of her strength and involuntary movement, and her fingers would fall off the mouse button. So she had a hard time with a regular mouse. So these grooves are in place to help keep her fingers in place. We block the wheel so she doesn't accidentally hit it. And the extra plastic makes it harder to press the mouse buttons. On the bottom, there's these little dimples, and they grip the table. And while we can turn the sensitivity up for someone who doesn't have strength, for someone who has too much strength, we can turn it down. And all of this resistance gives this little girl precision. So that's how we think about adaptability when it comes to that mouse. The next thing I want to show you is our switch hub, which is part of the solution. It has 5 switch ports. We love switches. Each of these switches can be set to do anything a mouse or a keyboard can do, and in very complex sequences. So I'm going to give you a simple sequence, you know, one that's kind of relative to what we're doing here. Imagine someone who maybe has who's a tetraplegic, who doesn't have a lot of fine motor control. They might have a trouble using a mouse, so they might use their computer with voice. And if they're on a Teams call, it's really hard for them to get their cursor up to those mute and camera buttons and click on those. And there's no way that they can possibly do the Control-Shift-M or Control-Shift-O keyboard shortcuts to turn on their mic or camera. But what we can do for those folks is we can take a switch, we can plug it into the hub, we can program the hub to say, when you press this button in Teams, that it throws a Control-Shift-M and a Control-Shift-O. So the hub is smart enough to know what program it's in. The button can be programmed to do a specific action in Teams. And 2 keyboard shortcuts with 1 button press is pretty much the simplest macro we can make. We can make way more complicated ones. I have a friend who has cerebral palsy, and what he does with his is he takes his button, he has a head array on his wheelchair, and what he does is that he programs his macro with pauses in the middle of them, because we allow them to do that. So he types a lot and posts a lot on social media, but he types with an eye gaze keyboard. So what he does to post on social media is he set his button so that it's Control A, Control C, Control V. So he's programmed his button to do that sequence in order once per press, so that it can accelerate his input, so that we can do things that will accelerate his input. And while switches are important, and we love switches, and we will always support switches, we did want to make a switch this time. So this is our wireless switch. This one happens to have an inverted Xbox D-pad on it. This is a 3D printed object. The way that these buttons come is basically the black versions. I tend to do colored stuff in here just to be really overt that it's 3D printed. But so what I just said about one switch, if someone has the ability to hit, you can program these to 8 different switches or 8 different functions. But if someone doesn't have the ability, you know, you could take this off, because this is adaptable. So I'm going to just twist this. I'm going to pop this off, and I'm going to put the standard 2-button mount on it. And you can program this to just have 2 buttons and not 8 if they don't have the dexterity to press 8. Now, some people don't have the dexterity to press down, so they have joysticks, which you can hit from side to side. Can anyone give me, well, I'm not going to ask because it'll take too long, but you know, if you want to throw it in the chat, we can certainly do that. Can anyone guess what that's for? I'll give you a second, then I'll tell you. It's cool. A lot of people say elbow, which is a really good guess, but it isn't. It's actually for chin. It's a chin button. So for people who don't have that kind of movement. Cool, huh? All right, I'm gonna move on. I'm gonna just check the chat, see if there's any questions. Hope everybody's doing okay. Chin, yeah, chin. Oh, wow, lots of chins. Cool, 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 cool. A lot of people had chins. Okay. So I'm gonna show you something that we worked on. And it's funny, not everything we do is high tech. A lot of times, especially talking to teachers, you know, I think I would always get this idea that, you know, kids didn't want specialty equipment. Stigma in school is something we think a lot about. You know, kids don't want to be othered from the equipment they use. So, and I will say that the assistive technology practice tries to find high-tech solutions for everything. So we would see a lot in the world that if you had bad vision, you know, you could zoom in using this. But one of the things that we kind of encounter out in the world is sometimes people just need something at a better posture. They just need it at a better height, right? So they can lean into it. It's completely natural to lean closer to something to see it. But clamshell laptops aren't really set up to like lean into, or you're going to smell what you ate for lunch on your fingers, you know? So what's really interesting is being able to, with our 2-in-1s, to set them in just different postures, right? So I'm going to show you something else that we kind of did with Surface a long time ago. If you think about desktop keyboards versus if you can picture a desktop keyboard in your mind, you're probably thinking about all the space that happens like around the inverted T of arrows, how page up, page down, delete are in their own little section. The F keys are above with like little sections between them. And for people who are blind, all that space on a traditional desktop keyboard actually gave them wayfinding to how to find it. And the problem with laptop keyboards is we're shoving all these keys into as tight as grid as possible because people want small laptops. And what it means is that you have a homogeneous kind of surface. And the only thing that we typically give people is these little bumps on F and J to tactily understand their keys. So if you're blind, it's actually really hard to understand a keyboard. So we at Surface put some extra bumps on our keyboard on F4 and F8. We thought we did a good job. We went out into the world and we said, hey, look at all this thing that we did. And all these blind people would show me basically all the stuff that they stuck to their keyboards. You know, I do joke a lot in here that my biggest competitor is duct tape and cardboard. You know, people augment their devices to make them suit their needs. And but what we would see is that people would put furniture bumps on their keyboards. And the problem with that is that if you're shutting your laptop lid and the furniture bumps there preventing you shutting the lid, your battery's not going to turn off. You're going to basically cook everything in your backpack, right? It's not good. So we created this thing called the Surface Adaptive Kit. This little guy. And the Surface Adaptive Kit consists of these tactile bumps that are brightly colored. And I have some on this keyboard. This gives a way for people to have a tactile function that's really bright and you know, noticeable. And they can place it on the keys that they find important, that they need to know, you know. Now, not all blind people want the color because they don't necessarily want to advertise. This one is translucent but tactile. It's really difficult to see on a camera. Hopefully you can get a sense. But it actually has even more shapes than the other one. These labels are basically to put the small one on the port of your laptop and the long one on the cable that you want to match with that port. So they're brightly colored, but they also have a texture on them. They have a unique tactile pattern on each one. So you can tactily align a cable to a port. And then lastly, we have these, which are pulls. You know, so not everything's for blind folks. Some of the fun things is that if you think about a modern clamshell laptop, we keep making them thinner. You know, no one wants thicker laptops, but the problem with a thinner laptop is that it requires fingertip dexterity to open it, right? So what we did is we made these pulls so that if you don't have fingertip dexterity, you can use these pulls. And then lastly, what I want to show you here at this station is this setup by a company called JC Powell. They make these for us for our Surface laptop keyboards. They're silicone covers that are high contrast, large type, and they're color coded for people with dyslexia. So the vowels are a different color than the consonants, the numbers are a different color than the system keys, the punctuation keys are a different color. So this is a fun little sort of thing that we do there. And I know I'm zipping along and I'm making good time, so hopefully it's not too fast. I do want to show you as much as I possibly can. If you want that, you can just look up JC Powell VerSkin. And we'll kind of do that. So this station I have here, and this is going to be hard for me to see if I can get this closer to the screen. So I have this station set up here to basically illustrate what someone with cerebral palsy might need in a school. This is what they would call, this is a Clevy keyboard. This keyboard's been around a long time. It's for students. You know, this one, you can see it has the color coding. It's lowercase, so it's a pedagogy-based keyboard. It's not junked up with a ton of like function keys and keys that they don't actually need. So, you know, it's really good that way. Still large print, high contrast. This one in particular has what they call a key guard on it, which is for folks with cerebral palsy who drag their hands across the keyboard. They're not going to hit every key as they go, right? If they need a key, they actually have to press in, right? That's typically what key guards are for. But in Windows 2, you could do something called filter keys, which would allow inadvertent key presses to be ignored. Thank you, Heather, for putting the Clevy in. And what I've got here on the screen, which I think is a little hard to see still, is this piece of software that I really love and I've been trying to work with a lot more. It's called Clicker 8. And what I like about Clicker is it really does, it sits in this really unique place in that it's kind of made for, it's made for specifically for schools, but it's really interesting. And so, let's see if I can get that. Looks so white. Hopefully you can see that a little. But one of the things that this is, what's great about this is that it has built-in switch support, and using our adaptive mouse, I'm actually not using this as a mouse. Actually, on the bottom of this, I always show this to folks, I've actually taped over the laser. This is not a mouse. I am using it as 2 buttons. And when I use it as 2 buttons, well, except when it doesn't want to do it for me. So what I've done is, this is the accessory center. This is where you would program the mouse. This is the Microsoft Accessory Center. It's what you use to program the adaptive accessories. And what I'm hoping that this will do, there it goes, is right now I'm using this as a switch keyboard. So you can kind of see that every time I press this mouse button, it's going to go to a different part of the keyboard. And then if I press the other button to select, it should go in to that part. And then I have an even smaller sort of subset of keys. So, you know, really cool for kids who have a really don't have the mobility to type. It's actually a really interesting, viable solution to buy, just like you know, this simple mouse that we have. It's a lot less than a lot of switch interfaces that you'll get for Windows, and you can program it. All this keyboard's looking for to do this switch interaction is F7 and F8. So actually, there's actually even cheaper solutions if you wanted to, like, you know, go online and find a lot of like single or two button things that you can kind of do. Oh, that's helpful, Heather. Thank you. Actually, I'm doing pretty good on time so far. I'm just not, I guess I'm just used to rambling, so I appreciate the focus. I'm used to pontificating. So you're all probably wondering what's in the back there, and I'll get to that, I promise. So I want to show you something new that we've done. And it's kind of interesting. Actually, that's not gonna, the big screen in the background is going to be distracting. So I want to show you this, which is a new Surface type cover. I'll give you a good look at it. And you're looking at it and you're probably going, yeah, okay, I've seen one of these before, it's a type cover. But I will tell you, The fact that you're not noticing what I want to show you about this is actually really good. Oh, got it, Karen. You totally got it. Oh, hi, Karen. Karen got it. I know Karen. So this is our standard type cover, so you can see that this one has larger letters. It's more contrasty. Yeah, I did have a ringer. Karen is my ringer for sure. Yeah, why aren't they all like that? It is interesting. I will say, and it's funny, I have this conversation with my industrial design team. So the point of this type cover is that we wanted it to be larger. We wanted it to be bolder and more contrasty, but we didn't want someone who was using this in the boardroom to feel othered or stigmatized by using it. We didn't want the old man keyboard, basically. Stigma is something we think a lot about in industrial design. So we pushed it. We made basically the biggest version and boldest version that we could, and then we took it back a little bit. We took it back to the point where someone could barely notice it unless we were holding up the other one beside it, right? That you wouldn't really notice the difference. But yeah, why don't we have this as the standard? You know, it's a good question. It's something that we're actually debating internally. I will say that as the accessibility guy, if we made this the standard, I'd show up next year and ask for a bigger one. So what I mean by that is there is, while balancing stigma and mainstreaming ideas is really important, it's also really important that the disabled have their own stuff, right? That we make stuff just for them, right? And take their needs into account. And I don't claim to have the full answer on this yet. This is only like a few months old. But yeah, it's fun. So I'm going to show you that. Now I want to show you something that we're kind of working on. I'm going to take our classroom pen, and I'm going to show you these 3D printed grips we have for our classroom pen. So we've got a whole bunch. There's way more than this too. There's like 9 of them. I only have like 4 of them here. The reason why we made these is that we started with these, quadriplegia is kind of our wheelhouse. It's where a lot of our ideas sort of start from because we hang out with a lot of quadriplegics. And so people without fingertip dexterity, can't really have the strength to put all their dexterity or all their strength on a single pen. Pen grips have been around in schools forever. These ones are 3D printed. They're more bulbous, they're bigger. And what's interesting is that we've been meeting people who have conditions like Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a tissue condition. It makes your tissue stretchy, and they just literally don't have the strength to like put on a pen tip. So what becomes interesting is that you can basically distribute the strength that you have across multiple fingers with something like this. The fact that it's thicker, we've been told by some people, doesn't stress their thenar space here. I had to look up that word for the spot between your fingers, thenar. So this is really interesting. But using this in conjunction with what we're doing with AI and Paint is really interesting. So what I'm going to show you, and I hope I can demo this correctly, is I'm going to show you Co-Creator in Paint, and we're having a version of Windows that I'm still running all beta hardware, so I still get all the engineering. I still get all the stuff that pops up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw this pen. I'm going to draw like a house, but it's going to be a really bad house, maybe with a little chimney on it, right? Hopefully folks can see that. I'll just try to zoom in a bit more. But I'm going to go over to Co-Creator, and I'm going to type in, cottage in field. And this is one of our new Surface Copilot Plus PCs. And what it's doing right now is it's generating an image using onboard stable diffusion. So it's not actually going to the internet. It goes to the internet. I shouldn't say that. It goes to the internet to make sure that you're not creating a picture that goes against our content creation rules. So what do I mean by that? Like you can't just draw a picture and go make this Taylor Swift, right? That would be against our content creation rules. So what this has done is it's made this small little cottage, and it doesn't really, now it's kind of replaced it. It's kind of made it, I probably should give it more prompting, but I am rushing, I must admit, a bit. And then, you can change the creativity slider. So I had the creativity slider pretty high. If I turn it down, it's going to try to make it look more like my sketch. So there, kind of like my sketch. But I'm going to turn it back up a little, and I'm going to change the style to pixel art. Give it a second. And so there, it's kind of gone in. Let's zoom in on that. Boop. Well, I guess zooming in on pixel art isn't the coolest thing. But yeah, we're really interested in how AI can accelerate interactions for disabled folks. And I think in the same way that everyone is sort of grappling with how to use AI in their work, we see a ton of opportunity for the disabled to accelerate. My boss is this guy named Dave Dame, who can't type because of his cerebral palsy. And now because of Copilot in Outlook and in Teams, he sends me typed messages all the time. He just writes constantly because he has the ability to. Before Copilot, all Dave would ever send me in Teams is basically those 1-minute video chats that you can do in Teams. He got really good at basically telling me what to do in like 60 seconds. So I still get those, but yeah. So I'm going to move over to here. I know probably some of you know what this is, but some of you might not. I have a sensory room, and I built, this is my second sensory room. This is actually the second version of the lab. And I've always had a sensory room. I know what potential sensory rooms have. I'm still working out how it relates to our products. So, in schools, it's, I'm thrilled that it's largely accepted that fidgeting is focusing. Our human factors colleagues, confirm that having the ability to fidget can help you focus. We were inspired to create a sensory room because we would see neurodiverse kids enter school, and educators would use a sensory room as a transitory activity to help ease that transition from basically home to the classroom, get those wiggles out so that kids had the ability to focus in class, use the sensory room throughout the day to help maintain that focus. When we first had our first sensory room, we were in Xbox and we were considering, well, what about the transitory challenge of going from school to home, right? Because we would hear about kids that would come home from school and that would basically like scream into pillows or bang their heads against the wall or things like that. And we wanted to look at what sensory things could happen in the home. And I think largely like a lot of that is kind of panned out. I mean, especially over the pandemic, like everyone has fidgets now and weighted blankets and, all kinds of things that were once very uncommon are now really common. But how does that actually relate to computers is kind of what I'm trying to think about with this space. When we have kids in here, one of the things that we host a lot in here because we really like it is we host transition programs a lot in here. It's actually one of the big areas that I really want to focus on. When I work with educators from K to 12 and university, I'm going to say this, and I know that this isn't blame. This is just something that I've kind of noticed is that assistive technology is often used as a Band-Aid to achieve educational goals. And I want to have the conversation with educators about how assistive technology is a vital vocational skill that will serve a person with disabilities through their whole life. Because if you go from a Google school to a Microsoft school, it all changes. You have to relearn everything. And if you got a disability, you got to relearn even more, right? You go to university and all of a sudden, all that stuff you got with your IEP goes away. You go to university and basically like, you lose all that. You go to work. And I'm sure, there's a bunch of you who are in read and write schools or co-writer schools, if those still exist, and because I hear employers asking, hey, someone's asking me for read and write. What the hell is that? And I'm like, yeah, I know. And so I try to think about like, how do we as Microsoft think about this lifelong vocational assistive technology? That's one part of that educational piece. But the sensory part of that piece is even a little stranger. I saw some graybeards on the call, just like me. We all remember a time when computers had the aesthetics of tools. They were these big beige boxes that sat beside our desks. They had the aesthetics of tools. Apple came out and made computers luxury consumer electronic items. They had this aesthetic that was basically meant to convey that you had a cool laptop that made you look cool, right? And I think as a culture, that's where we're at with devices, is that devices are there to make you look cool. And what I am trying to do with our industrial design teams is have this conversation of, instead of trying to make me look cool, how about you make me feel better, right? So what can I do on my device, this thing that I carry with me constantly all day long, to make my well-being better, besides watching cat videos on it? A lot of you have probably seen these things, comm strips. I think this is a great example of this idea of adding a neural diverse sensory stimulating need to a product that you carry with you. And I want to think about how we can do that in our own products. I mean, partly that's why, this mesh is kind of cool, a version of this, something to think about. But I have 1 minute. I did it just in time, but I would love to take a question or two if that's all right. And I can totally stay late.
Bryce, I think you're going to get inundated here from the crew.
That's
and
cool. I can totally stay late. I just wanted to be on time.
Yeah, no, first of all, hats off that you were able to get it in that amount of time. So before I came to Microsoft, I did my master's studies in inclusive education. And I'm just curious, as people might be exploring this maybe for the first time topically, like, are there resources that you have learned from, and even if they aren't like accessibility 101 books, but are there blogs or authors or any content that you kind of consume to help frame your thinking around how you design or how you interpret how to help people better access the tools and the things that we do day to day? I'm trying to find some from my own that I was going to share in the chat, but I just find them sort of ad hoc. So I'm just curious what you might have to share for the crew.
Yeah, and Heather, can I ask, someone asked about coming to the lab and learning. Could you put in the link to it's aka.ms/inclusive tech lab. There I can give this tour to any team that you kind of want. We can do this remotely. If you're ever in Seattle, you can come in person. As far as resources go, it's a little bit tricky for me. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years. It's hard for me to kind of go like, these are the things that shape. I will say that I've definitely hit the stage in my journey. We believe in nothing about us without us. And I really kind of don't have time for the professional accessibility world. And so what I mean by that is, I used to go to conferences where other me's would be at, right? And the only one of those I really go to anymore is ATIA, because I find the only reason why I go to ATIA in Florida is that they have days where like they let the public in. So, because that's really important to me, because I found that like working with other, like not to be weird, but you go to a conference with other people like me and you're basically like, I care about accessibility. Do you care about accessibility? Yeah. High five, like, okay, it's cool.
It's like an echo chamber. Yeah. Like an echo chamber. Right.
So I tend to go to events now. I've been really into supported employment lately, which is why like the transition program stuff is so important to me. And to kind of understand like how people can find employment. I will say one thing that I've definitely heard from the disabled community, because I am so focused on education and employment, and I still do gaming a lot too. I often get reminded by people in the disabled community that like, hey man, we don't have to all work. And I'm like, yes, I've heard you. It's like I basically show up and I sound like let's get to work. And so
that's hilarious. Yeah.
So
I'd like to go with that.
Yeah. So we, we're always trying to figure out the right thing for us. I will say though that, I mean, let's be honest about Microsoft. We talk a lot about do and not, we talk a lot about creation. We talk a lot about productivity. I do like the idea that productivity can be more than just work-related productivity. I think that's one idea that's been really kind of permeating. You know, one of the things when we bring in people with disabilities who are in here, they tell me filling out forms for like Medicare forms or medical forms is my full-time job. And so to hear insights like that and to be able to think about how we can actually help those folks, that's a type of productivity that's not necessarily about work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that.
There was a
Cool.
question that I don't know if you have an answer to this or not, but I did want to circle back to it. It came while you were presenting. What about deaf or hard of hearing? Any ideas around translating from sign language to hearing or from hearing to signing? Not all prefer closed captions.
Yeah, I mean, you know, ASL, BSL is definitely a language. I don't think enough people realize that ASL is not English with your hands. You know, that ASL originated from French Sign Language, so it's definitely its own thing. And I will say that we do think about those needs a lot. We have, you know, we've done interpreter support in Teams. All of our media events tended to do interpreter support. Teams has CART support now, so that you can have a live transcriptioner and not just automated captions. So we are still thinking about that. You know, in Windows we've improved our Bluetooth stack so that Bluetooth LE hearing aids, like future hearing aids, will work better with Windows. I will say that there is a lot that we could still do there, but I think there's some fundamentals around captioning and sign language that we really do need to kind of get back to. I will say I have heard educators tell me a lot that they love live captions in Windows for their classrooms, but they wish that they could show two languages at the same time. And I was like, yeah, that's a good feature, right? So that's something that, you know, I take back to the team to kind of think of, you know, lots of classrooms have so many languages. I mean, two is probably not even the right answer.
Right. Yeah, multiple, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think based on just the feedback that we're seeing in the chat, there's a lot of people that are maybe thinking about these topics for the first time in a long time or maybe ever. And I think that's the beautiful thing about conversations like this and the ability that we have at office hours to bring in folks like you, Bryce, and talk to the crew. So I know that a lot of questions will come from this. We'll circle them back to you as we can. We did share your contact information in the chat, so people might reach out independent from us, and we encourage them to do that as well.
Yep.
And we will move quick. We will be hasty with our posting on YouTube so that folks can share this out. But just want to say, yeah, people are saying when can you come back? So thank you, Bryce, for being here.
Please go to our Inclusive Tech Lab site if you want to have us do a tour for your school. We'd be happy to. We do these all the time. We didn't get to 20,000, you know, not doing these.
It's perfect. Perfect.
Yeah, this is incredible. Absolutely incredible. It's just the fact that we've kept this many people here even after our time, that just speaks to the value of what you're sharing, and I just so appreciative. So thank you, thank you, thank you. I'll work very quickly to get this up on YouTube, shared out, and just give me an extra second because I'm going to grab every single link that we shared so that that's all in there and everybody has it in one place. Very happy. Thank you all so much. And at that point, I'm going to kick y'all out of the meeting.
All right. Everybody have a great afternoon and be safe with the storm.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.